The Giants talking to Austin Johnson is not a small depth note. It is a warning about the defensive line. Not a signing, not a splash, not a parade. A warning. Because when Joe Schoen circles back to a veteran defensive tackle who already knows East Rutherford, that tells you the Giants may not believe this room is finished. And honestly, they should not believe it. John Harbaugh is not trying to build a cute roster. He is trying to build a harder one. That starts inside, where games get ugly, bodies get tired, and thin rotations get exposed. Nobody is paying attention to this the right way. Austin Johnson is not the headline because he is flashy. He is the headline because his name reveals the question behind closed doors. Do the Giants trust their defensive tackle depth? Or are they still searching? That answer changes everything about camp. Let's be honest about where things stand. The holes are clear, and this is where it gets real. The Giants cannot enter camp pretending defensive tackle depth is solved just because the top of the room looks better. That is how teams get fooled. One good signing does not fix a full rotation. One veteran addition does not erase every snap that still needs to be covered. One strong starter does not protect a defense when the interior gets tired in the fourth quarter. The trenches are unforgiving. If the Giants are thin inside, the whole defense pays for it. Run fits get softer. Linebackers get dirtier reads. Edge rushers lose clean angles. Drives become longer. Jaxson Dart, the current starting quarterback, gets fewer possessions to build rhythm. That is the hidden cost. The defensive line is not just a defensive issue. It affects the entire team. And the Giants still have a roster math problem. They need bodies who can survive camp. They need competition that does not disappear when the pads come on. They need veterans who can give the staff real snaps, not just a familiar name on a board. They also need to avoid desperation. That is the dangerous part. If Schoen waits too long, the market gets thinner. If he rushes, he can add a body who does not truly raise the floor. If he does nothing, Harbaugh might be forced to build a physical identity with an interior rotation that is not deep enough. That cannot happen. Big Blue cannot preach toughness while treating defensive tackle as a minor detail. And that brings us to the familiar name back in the conversation. The Giants have talked with veteran defensive tackle Austin Johnson, and that sentence has more weight than it looks like. Again, this is not a confirmed signing. Nobody should run around saying Johnson is back in East Rutherford. But the report matters because New York has spoken with a player who already spent 2 previous seasons in East Rutherford. That familiarity is not everything, but it is not nothing either. That overlay matters because talked with is different from signed. It keeps the story honest, but it also tells us Schoen is still checking the market. And I like that. I would rather have a general manager ask one extra question than pretend the room is complete because the depth chart looks cleaner on paper. Austin Johnson is the type of name that tells you how serious the Giants are about functional depth. He is not being discussed as a superstar. He is not being framed as the savior of the defense. He is a veteran defensive tackle option who can make a thin room more stable if the fit is right. That is the point. This is not cosmetic. Under Harbaugh, defensive tackle depth has to be part of the foundation. If the Giants want to be more physical, they need more than energy. They need bodies who can hold up. They need reliable competition. They need insurance against the inevitable camp attrition that hits every roster. Here is what nobody is talking about. When a team calls a familiar veteran, it usually means one of two things. Either the team wants insurance, or the team is not fully comfortable with what it already has. For the Giants, both explanations make sense. They already addressed the defensive front with Shelby Harris. That matters. But adding Harris does not mean the front office should stop looking. In fact, the Johnson conversation suggests the opposite. It suggests Schoen understands the trench rebuild is not a one-move job. That is good process. The bad version of this would be panic spending. The good version is patient pressure. Keep checking. Keep comparing. Keep asking whether the next veteran gives Harbaugh a more trustworthy room. Austin Johnson may not be the biggest name on the market, but that is exactly why this story is interesting. Because real roster building is not always glamorous. Sometimes it is a phone call. Sometimes it is a veteran market check. Sometimes it is admitting the room still needs one more serious body before camp. And when you see how the Giants are being connected to other practical roster additions, this all starts to click. The Austin Johnson conversation is about the defensive line, but it fits a wider pattern. The Giants are still being linked to practical veteran help after the draft. That includes a recent suggestion that New York should consider signing a former Philadelphia Eagles standout running back. That matters because the Giants are not being discussed like a team that is done shopping. They are being discussed like a team still scanning the edges of the market. And this is where it connects to the bigger picture. Schoen's job right now is not to chase the loudest name. His job is to protect the roster from weak spots before those weak spots become camp problems. Running back depth matters because Jaxson Dart needs an offense that can stay balanced. Defensive tackle depth matters because Harbaugh needs a defense that can stay physical. Special teams depth matters because close games often turn on hidden yards. This is all connected. The former Eagles running back link should not become the headline. It should not distract from Austin Johnson. But it reinforces the same idea. The Giants are still in the practical roster-building phase. Not fantasy football. Not nostalgia. Not a big-name obsession. Practical football. That is exactly where Harbaugh teams should live. If there is a back who can add stability, you check the price. If there is a defensive tackle who can add rotation value, you have the conversation. If there is a veteran who can make camp more competitive, you do not ignore it because the draft already happened. The NFL draft does not end roster building. It starts the next phase. That is the part fans sometimes miss. After the draft, the real teams keep working. They keep calling. They keep measuring. They keep asking which position group still looks one injury away from trouble. And the Giants have every reason to ask that question inside. Because if Harbaugh wants physicality, the defensive tackle room cannot be fragile. If he wants accountability, the bottom of the depth chart cannot be soft. If he wants a real competition, a player like Austin Johnson belongs in the conversation. And when you combine that with the defensive tackle market around Shelby Harris and DJ Reader, the trench picture gets even clearer. Shelby Harris is already part of the Giants' defensive line plan, and that is important context. But the conversation around his contract has also been framed as leaving the door open for more defensive tackle movement, including DJ Reader speculation. That overlay matters because it captures the real state of the room. The Giants added help, but the door may still be open. And that is exactly why Austin Johnson belongs in this discussion. He is not floating in isolation. His name sits inside a broader trench search. Harris gives the Giants one layer. Reader speculation represents another possible layer. Johnson represents the familiar, practical, depth insurance layer. That is how you build a room. Not by assuming one move fixes everything. By stacking options until the staff has enough answers. This also shows how Schoen is keeping different paths alive. One path is adding proven veteran help. One path is watching the bigger market. One path is letting camp competition sort out the back end of the group. The Austin Johnson talks fit neatly into that approach. And I am going to say this clearly. The Giants should not be embarrassed to chase defensive tackle depth. They should be embarrassed if they ignore it. Because Harbaugh's identity is not built on press conference lines. It is built on whether the defense can survive ugly football. It is built on whether the interior can hold ground when the game slows down. It is built on whether depth players can give you honest snaps when the starters need air. That is where games are won. That is where bad teams crack. That is why this quiet veteran conversation matters. Austin Johnson is not the whole answer. But his name proves the Giants are still asking the right question. Is this defensive line deep enough? Hot take. The Giants should add one more veteran defensive tackle before training camp, and I am not backing down from that. Not maybe. Not if it is perfect. They should do it. That number matters because one more defensive tackle could be the difference between a real rotation and a room that gets exposed by August. My prediction is specific. Austin Johnson will remain one of the most logical names on the Giants' defensive tackle watch list until Schoen adds another body or camp proves the depth is better than it looks. If I am wrong, I will come back to this video and own it. But I do not think I am wrong. Here is the part that will split Giants fans. I would rather see Schoen sign a familiar, functional defensive tackle like Johnson than gamble on the idea that the current room is automatically enough. That is not boring. That is mature roster building. Flash wins headlines. Depth wins survival. And the New York Football Giants need survival in the trenches. Big Blue is not finished until the trenches are deep enough to survive real football. That is the identity statement. Austin Johnson is not a flashy headline, but he may be a revealing one. The Giants have talked with him. They already added Shelby Harris. They are still being connected to veteran market possibilities. That is not random. That is a front office still working. So Giants fans, pick a side. Would you bring Austin Johnson back as familiar defensive tackle depth? Or should Schoen aim higher and keep chasing a bigger trench move? And be honest, do you trust the defensive tackle room right now? Or does Harbaugh still need one more body before camp? If you are riding with the G-men through every roster rumor, every trench battle, and every quiet move that shapes this rebuild, you know where that subscribe button is. This is where the Harbaugh identity gets tested. Go Big Blue.